Margaret Whitmore adjusted her diamond earrings one final time before stepping out of her penthouse elevator. At 62, she had built an empire from nothing, starting with a small catering business in her 20s and transforming it into a nationwide chain of luxury restaurants. Her net worth had crossed the 100 million mark 3 years ago, but success had come at a price. She was known in business circles as brilliant but ruthless, someone who valued efficiency above all else. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore." Her doorman nodded as she approached the gleaming black Mercedes waiting outside her Manhattan high-rise. Marcus Johnson, her driver of 3 years, stood beside the vehicle in his crisp uniform. At 34, he was reliable, punctual, and refreshingly quiet, exactly what Margaret preferred. She knew little about his personal life beyond the fact that he was unmarried and lived somewhere in Brooklyn. Their relationship was strictly professional, confined to polite greetings and discussions about traffic routes. The board meeting at the Chrysler Building first, then lunch with the Henderson Group at Le Bernardin, Margaret instructed as she settled into the leather seats. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, his voice steady as always. As they navigated through the morning traffic, Margaret reviewed her presentation notes. The Henderson Group was considering a $50 million investment in her latest venture, a chain of high-end health food restaurants. Everything had to be perfect. The meeting went exceptionally well. By 2 p.m., Margaret had secured the investment and was riding high on success. She decided to celebrate by having Marcus drive her to her favorite art gallery in Soho before heading home. "Take the scenic route through the village," she instructed, feeling generous with her time for once. As they wound through the quieter streets, Margaret's phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from her business partners. She was so absorbed in responding that she almost missed Marcus's sharp intake of breath. "Everything all right?" she asked, looking up from her phone. "Yes, ma'am. Just thought I saw someone I knew," Marcus replied, but his voice carried an unusual tension. 3 days later, Margaret found herself working late at her office when her assistant knocked on the door. "Mrs. Whitmore, I've been trying to reach Marcus for tomorrow's schedule, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. This isn't like him." Margaret frowned. In 3 years, Marcus had never been unreachable. He was the most dependable employee she'd ever had. "Try again in the morning. If you still can't reach him, call the temp agency." But the next morning brought no word from Marcus. Margaret found herself in the back of an unfamiliar car with a chatty driver who knew nothing about her preferred routes. The efficiency she prized so highly was disrupted, and it irritated her more than she cared to admit. By the 3rd day, concern began to creep in alongside her annoyance. Where was Marcus? Had something happened to him? That evening, Margaret made an impulsive decision that surprised even herself. She asked her new temporary driver to take her to Brooklyn, to the address listed in Marcus's employment file. The neighborhood was a far cry from Manhattan's gleaming towers. Narrow streets lined with aging apartment buildings spoke of working class families struggling to make ends meet. Margaret felt suddenly out of place in her designer coat and jewelry. Marcus's building was a 4-story walk-up with peeling paint and a broken intercom. After climbing to the 3rd floor, Margaret knocked on apartment 3B. No answer. A neighbor, elderly Hispanic woman, peered out from across the hall. "You looking for Marcus?" she asked in accented English. "Yes, I'm his employer. Do you know where he is?" The woman's expression grew sad. "Oh, honey, he got evicted 3 days ago. Landlord put all his things on the street. Marcus, he's been sleeping in his car, I think." But then she shook her head. "His car got towed yesterday." Poor boy. Margaret's carefully constructed world tilted slightly. "Evicted, but he has a good job. His little sister, she's been sick, real sick. All his money been going to her medical bills. He never said nothing, but I could see he was struggling." The revelation hit Margaret like a physical blow. For 3 years, Marcus had driven her to million-dollar deals and luxury restaurants while quietly sacrificing everything for his family. She thought of all the times she'd noticed him looking tired, attributing it to laziness rather than the exhaustion of someone carrying an impossible burden. "Do you know where he might be now?" The neighbor hesitated, then sighed. There's a shelter about 6 blocks from here, but it fills up fast. Sometimes people sleep in the park on Fulton Street." When they got nowhere else to go, Margaret thanked the woman and made her way back to the street, her mind racing. She instructed her driver to cruise slowly through the area, searching for any sign of Marcus. They found him just after midnight. He was huddled on a bench in a small park using a thin jacket as a blanket against the October chill. Her proud, dignified driver looked diminished, vulnerable in a way that made Margaret's chest tighten with an emotion she rarely allowed herself to feel. She approached quietly, not wanting to startle him. Marcus, his eyes flew open, and she watched as embarrassment flooded his features. He scrambled to sit up properly, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. "Mrs. Whitmore, I can explain." "No need to explain anything," she said softly, surprising herself with the gentleness in her voice. "But I think we need to talk." What happened next would be discussed in Margaret's social circles for years to come, though the full story would never be known to them. Instead of firing Marcus for his absences, Margaret listened, really listened. Perhaps for the first time in years, she learned about Keisha, his 16-year-old sister who had been battling leukemia for 2 years. She heard about the mountain of medical debt that had consumed his savings and forced him to choose between rent and treatment costs. She discovered that Marcus had been working a second job at night, loading trucks at a warehouse, to try to make ends meet. "Why didn't you tell me?" Margaret asked as they sat in the back of her car. Marcus wrapped in a blanket she'd retrieved from the trunk. Marcus looked down at his hands. "What was I supposed to say? Sorry, I'm tired, because I work 2 jobs to pay for my sister's cancer treatment. You pay me well, Mrs. Whitmore, more than I ever expected to earn. It wasn't your problem to solve." But as Margaret looked at this man who had served her faithfully, while carrying such a heavy burden in silence, she realized that maybe it was exactly her problem to solve, not because she had to, but because she could. The next morning, Margaret made a series of phone calls that would change their lives forever. First, she contacted the best oncologist in the city, a man whose restaurant she had frequented, and who owed her a favor from years past. Within hours, Keisha Johnson was transferred to a private room at Mount Sinai, where a team of specialists began developing a comprehensive treatment plan. Second, Margaret called her real estate agent. By the end of the week, Marcus and Keisha were living in a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment just 20 minutes from the hospital, with the lease paid for 2 years in advance. But Margaret's most significant decision came when she sat down with her legal team to restructure Marcus's employment. "I want to offer him a position as Director of Transportation Services," she announced to her bewildered lawyers. "Full health benefits, including coverage for pre-existing conditions, and a salary that reflects the responsibility of managing my personal and business transportation needs." The new role was largely symbolic. Marcus would still primarily be her driver, but it came with a salary triple his previous wages and health insurance that would cover Keisha's treatment completely. When Margaret presented the offer to Marcus, she watched as tears he'd been holding back for months finally fell. "Mrs. Whitmore, I don't know what to say. Say you let me help," she replied. "And call me Margaret. I think after 3 years and 1 park bench, we're past the formalities." 6 months later, Keisha was in remission. The brilliant teenager had dreams of becoming a doctor herself, inspired by the medical team that had saved her life. Margaret found herself contributing to a college fund, telling Marcus it was an investment in the future. The changes in Margaret herself were perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all. Her employees noticed that the ice-cold efficiency that had once defined her was tempered now with moments of unexpected warmth. She began asking about their families, remembering birthdays, and offering help when she learned of struggles. Marcus remained her driver, but their relationship had evolved into something neither had expected: a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared understanding of what it meant to face life's challenges. On the first anniversary of that night in the park, Margaret made an unusual request. "Drive through Brooklyn," she told Marcus. "I want to see the park where I found you." As they sat in the car looking at the bench where Marcus had slept that cold October night, Margaret reflected on how one moment of choosing compassion over convenience had changed everything. "You know," she said quietly, "I spent 40 years building walls around myself, thinking that caring was a weakness that would destroy everything